So my name is Axel von Perfall. I'm based in Berlin, coordinating our blockchain activities across Europe. I'll show you a little bit of what we're doing. Personally, I come from the energy sector, so advising utilities and energy companies around digital transformation. And this is how blockchain came up to me a few years ago. And then as we started with energy quite early on, our company asked me then to lead a group to push blockchain across the different industries. So there's an industrial side to it, with supply chain being one big topic, and there is another big area, and that's mostly led by our Swiss team around cryptocurrencies, which is one of our big activities. But today we're speaking about supply chain, and let me see how this works. Here we go. Just one word on our activities. As I said, I'm here in Germany, but we have activities all across the globe. In the US, obviously, our Asian colleagues are also quite active around this topic here, supply chain and cryptocurrencies. We have a big development team in India. Actually have our Indian development guy just over here in Germany these days to work on projects and have client meetings with him. So we work quite internationally on this topic. And the projects, these are just some of the examples of the last 2 years, are also quite cross-industry and quite international. And the aim also of such a group that I lead is to coordinate between the different activities in the different sectors, because obviously there are many industry experts around, and they always come. And then the client comes up and says, "Okay, can you tell us about blockchain? What does it mean for our industry?" And then those colleagues bring us in, and we start working on blockchain. This is an overview which I like to show because it gives you the big picture. If you speak about blockchain, people think a lot about Bitcoin, is the easiest first step, but then they think about cryptocurrencies. But that blockchain can be used in many other industries, far beyond the financial services industry, is often underestimated. And if you look a little closer, you'll see that there are a lot of activities going on in logistics, supply chain, in the different areas, in retail, in the energy sector, in the oil and gas sector, and there are really a lot of applications around. And the general idea of blockchain is always to connect companies with each other. That's my summary, more or less, of the last 2 years working on this topic, that blockchain really has an asset or a value added when you connect companies across different companies. And there are very few applications where the technology can be used really only within one company. In supply chain, there's a lot going on. I mean, the most famous example is probably the consortium founded by IBM and Maersk, with I think over 90 companies, shipping companies, port authorities, terminal operators, so all the different players in the industry who are signing up. And this consortium is actually a very nice example of the balance you have to find, because blockchain is a topic which by nature is very decentral. And if you look at Bitcoin, the idea is that there is no central entity and that it's completely democratized and completely decentral. If you look at such a consortium, it's good because companies join forces to develop such a topic, but at the end it's one shipping line, the biggest shipping line, Maersk, and the big IT company joining forces and more or less guiding the whole thing. So parts of this blockchain idea of being completely decentralized is not taking place here. And that's why it's also difficult from these consortia, and there are a couple of more also in other industries, they all have an issue about governance. How do they structure themselves? How do they cooperate? And to try to be as democratic and as broad as possible. And with IBM and Maersk, they are having problems bringing up the other shipping lines because they say sharing data with Maersk, they're skeptical about it. So there are some issues about that. And many other industries have taken on the challenge of applying blockchain. The majority of projects is still in a proof of concept phase or a pilot phase. Proof of concept being really a dry exercise with synthetic data or sample data. Pilot, in our definition, being a really productive solution, but in a test environment with a couple of test customers where you go out and it works with real customers, but still in a controlled environment. So the majority of projects is here. IBM and Maersk maybe on the step to go into a really productive case. But there are very few others which are really productive, up and running. So this is a challenge this year and next year to really bring those projects into the next phase. Now, what's the general situation and why does blockchain come into place? Heinz Günther, I think from Evonik, had a probably quite similar slide where you have different steps in the value chain where you exchange information. And I was just last week in Turkey where we did a project with a logistics company on blockchain. We built a POC, and this was more or less a case like this. So you have shipping companies, port operators, trucking companies, and so on, and they all have different information, and they share the information in parts of the value chain, but in the one example was the shipping line exchanges information with the exporter or the importer, doesn't matter. And in the middle you have a couple of players who are not informed about this transaction. And they only at a relatively late stage get this information. And so if you could find a platform which consolidates this information, then this is really of a big help for the parties involved. The difficulty is they don't send letters, or it's not all manual. They have IT systems in place. They have SAP, they have, I don't know, logistics, special software. So they have IT in parts of the value chain. So how do you build a system which somehow is across everything, but still integrates the existing systems? To find the right spot for such a case is one of the important parts of a blockchain project, to really identify the use case which has a business value. Because sometimes these workshops have a character where you discuss about where can we use blockchains. Somebody said it's like a medicine, and then you try, where can I apply the medicine? You're like, do I have some stomach ache, or no, it's okay. Do I have something on my knee? So you test around to find the right application. But you have to do it the other way around. You have to look at the business problems first and then see, can we use blockchain here? And this is a business problem which is real, which is very important in this industry. And the ideal world is something like this, where you have a decentral but still shared ledger of data, and it's up to the project or the involved parties to agree on which data to be shared. So that's really part of the project, to agree how can we share it, who can see which data. I mean, the naive way of seeing blockchain is that everybody sees everything. But that doesn't work it works for Bitcoin with these keys and so on, so it's like half anonymized, but it doesn't work in a business environment. In a business environment, you have to make sure that you have data segregation somehow, that the one competitor cannot see the orders of the other one. Nobody would agree to that. But blockchain still has a value to be a relatively easy linking pin or linking system between the different parties. So this is how it can, how on the left-hand side, how it can look like in an ideal world, that everybody adds information to a central decentral ledger, and that information flows are much faster. So you can you improve basically the processes. You avoid in the container terminals reshuffling of containers, because you know in advance that the container will have this destination or will go to that trucking company 2 days later. So you put it there at a point where you can easily grab it again. These are the practical things which you can improve when you share the information in this way. There are a couple of studies and reports from projects with savings potentials. I will not go through the different numbers. These are from different sources. The idea is just to give a rough estimate. It's usually two-digit saving, and it's mostly about savings. So it's not about new revenues in supply chain. It's about efficiency and improving processes, avoiding double work, avoiding empty containers, avoiding empty trucks. So just a better supply chain flow by improving information flow in the process. And I haven't considered, like our host is doing, considered financial flows here. If you add the financial flows to it, that you can easier faster payments, then you can even more benefits. These are just a couple of examples. IBM Maersk, I mentioned that one already. Provenance is an organization or project tracking food over various partners. Block freight, and behind there are many more. Block freight is just one example. It's cargo chain, ship chain. There's so many projects out there to work on the logistics side. So there's really a lot going on. These are some of our projects. Our colleagues in Australia did a project on a port community system, so taking the point of view of a port and all the surrounding stakeholders, that they can, everybody shares information around the port to improve processes, including customs, shipping companies, and authorities like the veterinary authorities, certification bodies, and so on, so that everybody shares the information on such a platform. We do a couple of projects on food chain, food logistics, because the importance of tracking the whereabouts of a food product is quite important for safety reasons, to prove the real source of the food. If you have an airline, for example, and they offer an Angus beef, then they want to make sure that it's really an Angus beef and not some other kind of beef from somewhere else. So it's about tracing the origins, because you always have the ledger of the transactions. You can always see where the product, be it food, a diamond, container, whatever, where it has come from. We were involved in a project here in Germany around pallet handling, where a couple of consumer goods manufacturers, retailers, as well as SAP and PWC and GS1 teamed up to investigate the potential of harmonizing and improving pallet logistics in the German retail. I'm not talking the big Euro pallets, but the ones which the small ones with the gitter on the side, which are being pushed into the supermarkets. And there are different systems with the deposit system and the ownership, and so it's quite a complicated system with a lot of paperwork and a consortium. They just completed the first phase and are working now on the second phase to go further into implementation. We have, I'll go quickly over there, we have a tool, we call it Smart Trace, which we apply as a modular kit based on a blockchain platform, which we use for different industries for all these track and trace applications, which is pretty flexible to be applied in different companies. With the screenshot here, but I'll be quick on this one. What is maybe just one slide on the architecture? How does a blockchain project look like, and how is it implemented? If you speak about it, the data is being exchanged on the blockchain. Then you sometimes, if you're not really into the topic, you can get the impression that everything runs on a blockchain. What we see is that the blockchain is being used as the foundation layer here to store the most important transactions and to store a set of data, a set of business rules on which you agree on. But a lot of this other stuff, the apps, the procedures, exchanging data and so on, this has to be done by classical IT infrastructure. You'll need this anyway, so it is not purely on blockchain. So it's a combination of a blockchain layer, an application layer, and then the interface layer. The interface can be, as I mentioned, apps and so on, but it's also sensors is quite important, because with the sensors you have the additional benefit that if the sensor feeds in data and it's being put on the blockchain, then it is undisputable that if you trust the sensor, that nobody manipulated the sensor, but you have the data put on the blockchain, and then in case of a discussion around was the silo full or empty, or was the container, did the temperature of the container go below a certain limit, then you don't have a discussion about it, that somebody modified the data, because it's directly from the sensor in a kind of a safe archive being the blockchain. So sensors have a big, using sensors in this context is quite important. So it's a multi-layer architecture, and it's up to every project and every consortium, every company working with it to define what do we put on the blockchain, what's a regular IT infrastructure, and how will the interfaces look like. And then the biggest question, this is my last slide, the biggest question you always get is, why do you need blockchain for all this? Can we not do it with apps and web platforms and so on? And I mean, it always depends on a lot of factors, but these are two things where I believe they are valid points for many projects. Blockchain doesn't fit everywhere, but these two are quite important. One is the distribution of the data, that you really store it decentrally. Has a safety aspect to it, because it's redundant. I mean, then you can argue, okay, on the cloud, you also have backup servers and so on. Anyway, but it's still a fact. It's stored decentrally. It has some safety aspect to it. The other aspect regarding this decentral approach is it's quite easy to scale. So you just ramp up the number of nodes. You can just relatively easily add new players to the system. If you have a new company joining a project and they have 50 locations, relatively easy to ramp it up. So there are these two benefits. And then the immutable ledger, the fact that you cannot change the blockchain, has the benefit of putting data there into a central storage, or no, central is the wrong word, a joint storage between different companies, and that the data which is put there cannot be modified anymore. And this refers both to the transaction data of shipments being done, or purchase orders or whatever, but you can also put some business rules here. For example, that if the container leaves the port and the sensor has identified that the ship really left the port, or you have some tracking device on it and it left the perimeter of the port, then this information will be put here and cannot be modified anymore. And this data cannot be modified by one single party. So also the business rules cannot be modified by one single party. So if you have a cooperation between companies, then you can always rely on the fact that only if you all agree, you can change something. If just one company wants to change something, it's hardly possible to do that. So the safety of the data and this possibility to to keep the data immutable, this is really these are the two big benefits of the technology. Here are my contact data. If you have any questions, I don't know about the timing now. If we have time, I'm happy to take questions. Otherwise, just contact me after the conference. As there is no moderator, I will just take questions. Please.
Just a question. You said savings in the long run for application.
Yeah.
So how much does a blockchain application cost when you sell that to a CEO of a company?
It depends on the project, but it can be, I don't know, proof of concept somewhere between 100,000 euros and more, or a pilot project will be less than 1 million, let's say, put it this way. It really depends on the project. It's difficult to say. It's quite, I mean, to set up a proof of concept for existing business or use case, which is jointly defined with the company, can be done in with less than 100K, and then goes up. Yes, please. Yeah. 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 No. But it's a very valid point, because the interface between the physical world and it's not only food tracing, it's also smart meters in the electricity or transactions in logistics. Is always, you always rely on the manual input. If you don't have a sensor, you rely on the manual input on the of the parties involved, and there's no remedy to that. The blockchain can't help here. The only thing is if you convert this validation principle that a few people have to confirm, then you can maybe, I don't know, 3 people saw that the ship left the port, to stay with this example, and 3 people confirm it. Then you could do it this way. But usually you have to trust the people involved. Yeah.
So you mentioned that PricewaterhouseCoopers delivers lots of proof of concept blockchain projects around the world. What are the preferred blockchain platforms?
It's Ethereum and Hyperledger. We see Hyperledger is, at the moment, quite popular among corporate customers. Fabric and Sawtooth. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But to add something, Hyperledger is not blockchain as we understand blockchain.
Yeah.
Just for the record.
I know this discussion. The blockchain fundamentalists, they don't see these kinds of platforms because they're run by one company. It's like a piece of software which you put on your computer and you share the data. So it is a little bit away from the original concept of, how was he called, Sashimoto or whatever, Ethereum, the Bitcoin founder, where you really, I mean, Bitcoin is really amazing because you don't have a central entity. You have those wallet operators, but you don't have a central entity. So, but in practice, in the industry side, if you remember the slide with with crypto and industry, enterprise blockchain doesn't work that way. Yeah. Oh, please. Can you say again, please? There's none at the moment, even not in the industry where I would say it's up and running, full-fledged, like, I don't know, an SAP system which is rolled out at the moment. There are, I don't know, a handful maybe which are running in a pilot mode with real customers and with a full installation.
With your experience, what's the timeline?
Difficult to say. One last question. Okay, maybe a year or 2. Yeah. Maybe one last question?
We have like a plan.
Okay.
Maybe ask this question in the
Yeah.
break.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Sorry.